The topic for today's discussion is pollen germination and pollen tube growth. Myself, Dr. P.K. Singh, Government VVSD Girls College, Jaspur Nagar. The pollen grains, when the compatible pollen grains reach up to the stigmatic surface, their germination starts. The primary requirement for the germination of these pollen grains is hydration, which in many cases is after the reaching of the pollen grains to the stigmatic surface, the cuticle present in the stigmatic surface that dissolves by the enzymatic activity and that provides hydration to the pollen grains. The due to hydration, the uh, pollen grains, wall of the pollen grains swells, and the intine of the pollen grains come out in form of pollen tube. The distance of distance a pollen tube has to travel in order to reach the egg depends on the length of the style, which is quite variable in different species. The pollen tube acts as a sperm carrier and it discharges the sperms, one in the vicinity of egg cell to form the zygote, and the other sperm it discharges in the vicinity of the central cell to form the primary endosperm nucleus, which later on develops to form the endosperm. The first requirement of pollen to germinate is their hydration, and this induces activation of the inactive cytoplasm of the pollen grains. Many cellular organelles undergo considerable changes in comparison to what has been observed in inactive ripe pollen. In this figure, the stigmatic surface is shown along with the germinated pollen grains in Petunia axillaris. And this figure is showing the longitudinal section of pollinated pistil. Here it is showing the germinated pollen grains on the stigmatic surface. Some pollen tubes have reached up to the ovules and some are present in the styler region, and some pollen grains have just left the stigmatic surface. The changes observed during the activation of pollen grains of Lycopersicon peruvianum are the cisternal or rough endoplasmic reticulum arranged in stacks in the mature pollen are set free. Second, that is production of abundant vesicles. Third, formation of a thick callosic layer. Fourth, aggregation of ribosomes into polysomes. Fifth, formation of lamellae inside the plastids. Activation of pollen grain does not induce any change in mitochondria, lipidic bodies, generative cell and vegetative nucleus. There is sufficient evidence to suggest that the pollen germination specific RNAs are transcribed before the morphological ripening of the pollen and are stored in an inactive form. As a consequence, the pollen can germinate and the tube can grow up to a certain length when incubated in the presence of a transcription inhibitor such as actinomycin D. This clearly indicates that the pollen germination specific RNAs are transcribed before the morphological ripening of the pollen. Normally, only one tube develops from a pollen grain. In polysiphonous grains, that is, pollen grain in which more than one pollen tubes are formed, they are known as Siphonous pollen grains. For example, 10 pollen tubes are formed in Elthia rosea, 14 in Malva neglecta, but as a rule only one of them grows further. Initially, in polysiphonous pollen grains, there is formation of more than one pollen tubes, but ultimately only one develops, rest diminish. In plants where pollen grains are united into tetrads, for example orchids or pollinia, for example in family Asclepiadaceae, several pollen tubes are produced at the same time and all of them may grow. Branching of pollen tube is quite common in some members of Amentiferae. Now growth and structure of pollen tube. The pollen tubes as a rule emerge at the germ pores on the pollen grains, which are generally covered with only a very thin layer of exine. The first event associated with germination is hydration and swelling of the outer pectic layer of the intine, which leads to rupture of exine. Almost entire content of the grain now move into the tube. Rapid growth of the tube is restricted to the tip region. This figure is showing germinated pollen grain. Figure A is showing the pollen tube in which it is shown that cytoplasm is confined in the apical region, and in figure B this is the enlarged apical region of the pollen tube. In a growing tube, most of the cytoplasm is confined to the apical region and a large vacuole fills the grain and older region of the tube. To restrict the cytoplasm to the apical region of the growing tube, a series of callose plugs are formed at a regular distance behind the tip. As a result, a fully grown pollen tube is subdivided into many compartments. Due to formation of these callose plugs, the pollen tube is divided into several compartments. The plugs originate as the ring in the inner side of the wall. They gradually grow towards the center, reducing lumen and finally sealing the tube. This figure is showing the callose plug formation in the pollen tube. These are the stages of the callose plug formation. From left to right, in the callose plug are initiating in the inner wall, they are growing towards the center, and finally in the last figure, that is on the right side of this figure, the callose plug is fully formed and the pollen tube is subdivided into compartments. Under the high power of light microscope, the extreme tip region of tube appears hemispherical and transparent. The zone behind it looks granular. The transparent apical zone is called cap block. It exists only as long as tube is growing and disappears when the growth ceases. Now, pollen tube wall. The pollen tube wall is divided into three layers: outer pectic layer, middle pectocellulosic layer, which is having fibrillar component rich in beta-1,4-glucans, and inner callosic layer, which is rich in beta-1,3-linked glucans. The pollen tube is divided into three layers: outer pectic layer, middle pectocellulosic, and inner callosic layer. That is made up of, the inner layer is made up of callose. Now, pollen germination. The primary requirement for the pollen germination is the hydration, whether it is in vitro or in vivo. Uptake of water leads to swelling of the grains and their activation. Their high relative humidity is the first essential requirement. Now, in vivo pollen germination. Stigma possesses a specialized surface for catching and holding the pollen. The main function of stigma is to provide the pollen with water necessary for their germination. In many plants, it also supplies necessary medium for pollen germination in the form of exudates. The stigmatic surface that secretes certain exudates which provides hydration to the pollen grains, and that is the primary requirement for the pollen germination. The stigmas which secrete exudates are called wet stigmas, for example petunia, and those which are not are called dry stigmas, for example cotton. The chief function of exudates appears to be retention and germination of pollen. According to Ciampolini et al., in species having solid styles, the exudate consists of polysaccharides, proteins, and lipids, whereas those with hollow styles show only polysaccharides. In certain plants, such as Diplotaxis tenuifolia, family Brassicaceae, the stigma is covered with cuticle. The pollen grains degrade the cutin enzymatically in order to obtain water necessary for germination. The pollen grains contain an elaborate set of enzymes. Some of these present in the wall and are available as soon as the pollen grain makes contact with the stigma. Now, in vitro pollen germination, that is germination of pollens in laboratory conditions or in artificial conditions. Water is necessary for the germination of pollen grains both in vivo and in vitro conditions. Other factors which have been found important for pollen germination and pollen tube growth are: number one, that is carbohydrate. For germinating pollen grains, in nutrient medium, sugar is always necessary. Two roles have been ascribed to sugars. Number one, that is control of osmotic pressure and to serve as the respiratory substrate. For many sugars tested for their ability to promote pollen germination and growth, sucrose, the sugar present in most pollen, is most effective. According to Iwanami 1959, the time taken between imbibition and tube initiation depends on the kind of sugar present in the grain at the time of shedding. Now, boron. Among inorganic substances, boron in the form of boric acid or borate has most dramatic effect on pollen germination and pollen tube growth. Boron reduces bursting of pollen tubes as well as enhances percentage germination and pollen tube growth. Some roles of boron are the effect of water relationship and thus preventing pollen tube bursting. Translocation of sugars. Boron is very important nutrient in translocation of sugars. Direct or indirect influence on enzymatic steps in the biosynthesis of carbohydrates. Now, calcium. Calcium plays important role in pollen germination and pollen tube growth. The percentage of pollen germination and pollen tube growth is far better when a large population of pollen grains is grown as compared to when they are placed separately on the culture medium. This observation led to the recognition of what has been called population effect or crowding effect. The population effect is brought about by calcium ions. The fourth factor, that is enzymes. Cellulase, pectinase and callase are present in pollen grains, and which cellulase and pectinase are released immediately after the pollen are placed in germination medium. When supplied exogenously, these enzymes increase the rate of tube elongation. Cellulase and pectinase cause tube elongation through an increase in the plasticity of the tip region. The fifth factor, that is plant hormones. Promotion of pollen tube growth has been recorded by the application of gibberellic acid and auxin, but the effect is not appreciable. That is, uh, the GA and auxin are not affecting the pollen tube growth very much. The sixth factor, that is physical factors. Among the physical factors, temperature is most important for pollen tube growth. The optimum range of temperature is 20 to 30 degrees centigrade. Now the path of pollen tube. After pollen germination, the pollen tubes grow on the surface of stigma. Based on the morphological features, three types of styles have been recognized: solid, open and semi-solid. Solid style, mainly found in dicots, is characterized by the presence of central strand of elongated specialized cells that constitute the conducting tissue or the transmitting tissue. The functions of exudate. Several important roles have been ascribed to the stigmatic and stylar exudates. Number one, help in adhesion, hydration and germination of pollen on stigma. That is, the exudates are holding the pollen grains to the stigmatic surface and providing hydration to the pollen grains. Protect the pistil from insect attacks and or microbial infection. The exudates are containing certain chemicals which have inhibitory effects on insects and microbial attacks. Act as a liquid cuticle to save stigma from dehydration. Serve as food for vectors during pollination. Serve as nutrition for the growing pollen tubes through stigma and style. With regard to the fact that pollen tubes always grow in the direction of ovary. Strasburger in 1887 stated that the path of pollen tubes in the pistil is guided by the secretion from the ovule. That is, ovules are secreting certain chemicals which attract the pollen tubes. That is, chemotropic attraction of the pollen tube towards the ovule. The calcium ions are naturally occurring chemotropic agent in the pistil of Antirrhinium majus. In the ovary, the concentration of calcium ions is extremely high in the placenta and the ovary wall, but the ovules have comparatively low calcium ion concentration, and there is no increase in it in the micropyle or embryo sac. Now, entry of pollen tube into the ovule. Based on the site of entry of pollen tube into the ovule, it may be of following types. That is, number one, porogamy. In porogamy, the pollen tube enters through micropylar region. When pollen tube enters into the ovule through micropyle, it is known as porogamy. Chalazogamy, that is entry of pollen tube into the ovule through the chalaza. Mesogamy, when pollen tube enters through integument or funicle, it is known as mesogamy. With respect to porogamy, it has been suggested that the entry of pollen tube into the ovule and its subsequent growth toward the embryo sac is regulated. The idea of chemotropic guidance of pollen tube growth towards the embryo sac is also supported by Rosen 1965. However, he holds the view that the substance is secreted by the micropyle itself rather than the synergids. That is, the micropyle secretes certain substances which attract the pollen tube towards the micropyle in case of porogamy. This figure is showing the porogamy, chalazogamy and mesogamy. Figure in porogamy, the pollen tube is entering through the micropyle. In chalazogamy, pollen tube enters through the chalazal region, and in mesogamy, pollen tube enters through integument. But in all the three cases, whether it is porogamy, chalazogamy or mesogamy, pollen tube enters into the embryo sac only through micropylar region. It was Chao 1972 with his experiments on Paspalum arbiculare concluded that the integument by its dissolution secretes a mucilaginous substance, water soluble carbohydrate, which helps in growth of pollen tube both mechanically and chemotropically. That is, the mucilage formed by the dissolution of integument that facilitates the entry of pollen tube inside the ovule. A special structure which facilitates the entry of pollen tube into the ovule is obturator. It forms a sort of bridge for the pollen tube to reach the ovule. After fertilization, the obturator shrinks and disappears. Unfortunately, there is no explanation available for the mechanism of pollen tube entry into the ovules, showing chalazogamy or mesogamy. Now, entry of pollen tube into the embryo sac. Whatever may be the site of entry of pollen tube, that is micropyle, chalaza or funicle or integument. That whatever may be the case, porogamy, mesogamy or chalazogamy, but pollen tube always enters into the embryo sac through micropylar end. One of the synergids, there are in the egg apparatus which is present in the micropylar region of the embryo sac. There are two synergids and one egg cell. Before the entry of the pollen tube into the embryo sac, one of the synergids starts degenerating and it provides seed for the entry of pollen tube into the embryo sac. The degeneration of synergid starts after the pollination and before the arrival of the pollen tube. This indicates that there is somewhat genetic control that which synergid out of the two synergids, which synergid is going to degrade for providing seed for the entry of pollen tube inside the embryo sac. Increase in gibberellic acid concentration in the ovules as a consequence of pollen tube pistil interaction has been suggested as the possible cause of the breakdown of synergid in cotton. The contents of pollen tube are discharged in the synergid and the tube does not grow beyond it in the embryo sac. One of the two sperms fuses with the egg cell to form the zygote. The other sperm fuses with the secondary nucleus to form primary endosperm nucleus. The zygote develops to form the embryo and the primary endosperm nucleus develops to form endosperm.